I've got some pretty big takeaways from Royals rally on Saturday. What are they? Find out next on this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can download our podcast on wherever you get your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey. We're also on YouTube. We're getting closer and closer to our goal of 1,000 subscribers by opening day 2024. Still about 2 months to go before opening day, and we're nearly 60 subscribers away from 1,000. And just because we reached that threshold doesn't mean we want to stop there. We want to continue to add and get to our next goal, which hopefully will be around 2,000 by season's end. So taking it piece by piece, step by step, but be sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl is going to be coming up this Sunday, so start getting your picks in, whether they're parlays, they're prop bets, or you're just betting on money line spreads, whatever the case may be. May not always be the football either. It can be college basketball. I won some money recently in this wild weekend of college basketball this past Saturday. Had a pretty healthy sum of money come in from winning some of those bets. So it can be exhilarating. It can be fun if you're making the right bets. Don't just throw your money away. Find the right bets to go with, find the right parlays, and have a lot of fun with it over on FanDuel. So after this podcast episode, go and create your account today. If you're a first-time listener, of course, welcome in. We love new listeners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. A little bit more about me. I work in Kansas City in sports at Sports Radio 810 WHB. Going to have a pretty busy week doing these podcasts, which are now coming back to 5 episodes a week for the next 10 months. And we also got the Super Bowl. So I'm going to be juggling a lot of stuff, but if you want to catch me over there, 810 WHB and 1510 AM ESPN Kansas City. If you want some other sports takes, but you know when you come here to Locked On Royals, you're getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Now, I had the chance on Saturday to go out to Kauffman Stadium, see the long line of fans, which was great to see. It wasn't great weather, and in the back of my mind, I'm going, man, I hope this isn't what opening day weather is going to feel like, because I've been there before. I've been to Kauffman Stadium when it's 45 to 50 degrees and rainy. Doesn't feel too good. But I will say this, for all the sessions there, I was at the K from about 9:30 to 1:30. And so I got to see a couple of the sessions, and there were a lot of people there, a lot of buzz. And that, number one, was awesome to see. I know a lot of people were responding to me on Twitter and just saying how much fun they had, how the Royals really did that well. And that's important. It's a little thing, but having something like that for the fans, making it enjoyable. And maybe not everybody had a great time, but I know a lot of people that gave some feedback to me, which is always appreciated and helpful, was a good thing. It was a good time, and the players were respectful. They were answering questions, signing autographs. That's cool to see. But for me, I wasn't down there with the fans. I was up in one of the media rooms getting a chance to go through a list of players and sit down and hear what they had to say, ask a couple of questions. And there was actually a lot that I took away from those 3 to 4 hours I was out there at Kauffman Stadium. The laundry list they had was quite impressive. We bounced around from Vinny Pasquantino to Bobby Witt Jr. to Chris Bubich to J.J. Picola to John Sherman, Salvy. A lot of guys were there. A lot of the stars, of course. No MJ. I do believe MJ was down with the fans, though. Correct me if I'm wrong. No, Michael Massey we saw briefly. Hunter Renfroe was there. Will Smith, Nick Anderson we actually had a chance to talk to. So they were all there, right? Some guys hadn't reached the Kansas City just yet, still doing some offseason workouts, or they were, still back in their own country. So they're not getting the chance to come back to Kansas City before spring training. So that also could have played a factor. But there was a very reoccurring theme I was getting from the guys that were speaking to the media and their answers that they had to the questions that were posed to them. And it was confidence. Man, I thought it was perfect the way the Royals did their media breakdown. Vinny Pasquantino was leading off. You can tell how much Vinny Pasquantino wants to be back out there. And what's great about Vinny, which is why he's so likable, why you see him on popular podcasts all the time, why you see him being interviewed by Chris Rose on MLB Network or not MLB Network anymore, but his podcast, right? But he's been on MLB Network many a times before. One, he's really well spoken. Two, he's also going to be honest with you. You know, one thing that it's always bugged me working in sports is players and coaches speak. You know, yeah, I know some players are not going to venture out and say a lot of things that, you know, could burn them later. I'm not asking them to say bad things, but you know what coaches and players speak is. It's when basically you say, well, you know, we're looking forward to playing so-and-so next week, or we're going to take it day by day and we're going to be happy with that. Bill Belichick, perfect example. Hall of Fame coach, just coaches speak all the time. It's not very entertaining. He's not going to get caught saying something that he may regret later. But with Vinny Pasquantino, he's leading off. He was very honest about the last couple of years. He was honest about his health and a couple of things that really stood out to me. You know, he was talking about losing some friends in the offseason. You know, that just happens in Major League Baseball. It's a business. Guys getting traded away, and you make friends. Just because that player may not be good doesn't mean they couldn't be a good friend. But Vinny basically said something along the lines of, it sucks to lose friends, but hey, I don't blame the front office for what they did one bit. If you want to keep your friends, you better start winning some ball games. That prevents guys from getting traded if you're winning. And, you know, saying that they're ready, we're coming, we want that division, we want the Central. We're tired of hearing about the Tigers and the Twins being the top team. We want to be that team. And wasn't just saying it for, you know, false hope, in my opinion. I think there is this collection of guys right now that really believe what the front office has done is going to put them over the edge. And that can be minimal to some people out there because you're going to say, well, everybody believes in themselves. Everybody believes in themselves before the regular season. But I also think you need guys to buy in. And what can be different is when you're bringing in guys on one-year deals, sometimes those players may just sign there because that's the last spot they could go to. They're not as bought in. The core guys they have, Vinny, Bobby, Massey, I'm going to throw Salvy in that conversation because he's always going to want to be playing here in Kansas City. He even said that, and we're going to talk about that later on in the show today. But MJ Melendez, Michael Garcia, Reagan, Singer, Bubic, these guys are all bought in to win. They haven't had the chance to experience a lot of winning except for Salvador Perez. And I got that sense with Vinny. I got that sense with Brady Singer, even. I thought it was great to hear Brady Singer, who, again, we're going to talk about in the show today, be so upbeat and be so positive. And that can't always be the same for everybody, right? When you have 10, 15 guys lined up for interviews, somebody's going to come off the wrong way. Never got that. Everybody that sat down, even new guys, Nick Anderson being one of them, seemed very excited and enthused to be in Kansas City because they feel like they're building something here. They want to win and win desperately. That's also what I got from Bobby Witt Jr. and a guy that, you know, I asked him the question of, how do you like that pressure of being a centerpiece, a star of a team that now has its highest expectation in nearly a decade? And the reason I asked that question is because Bobby said that early on in his career, he felt the immediate pressure. I've got to perform. I'm a top draft pick. I was the number one prospect in Major League Baseball. I've got to perform well. And he put everything on his shoulders. And he said, now, you know, I feel like there's guys around me that can help. There's guys that can really make this team a winner. And he wasn't taking a shot at past teams, but it was the pressure he had as a 20, 21-year-old player of, I feel like I had to perform more than some of these other guys that are out there. And that was true. That's absolutely true. There was more pressure on Bobby Witt Jr. than there ever was on a Michael Massey or a Nicky Lopez or a Kyle Isbell or Melendez or Prado. He had by far and away the most pressure. And that's kind of this sense now of he's got the most pressure he's ever had. He's coming off an MVP type of season. Everybody's thinking he's the star, the centerpiece, want him, you know, signed to a long-term deal. He knows all of that. But he said, no doubt, I love having this pressure because you can tell with a lot of these guys how badly they care, how badly they want to bring winning baseball back to Kansas City. And maybe you're sitting here listening going, I don't buy it. You know, these guys got to win games. There's always going to be fans out there that aren't going to buy anything I say, believe anything I say until they actually start winning baseball games. And that's totally fine. That's very understandable. I'm just giving you the reads I could kind of get on these players. And you're always going to have an optimism at the beginning of the year. You're going to feel like, hey, you can make something special. But even when Matt Quatrero spoke to the media, the same guy, even keeled, and JJ Piccolo and John Sherman kind of joked about that he's not going to get too high, too low. I think it was JJ that said, he's the same guy, has the same mannerisms if his team won 56 games or if they won 106. There is no change there. He is going to be the exact same guy. And he felt like, this is the guy he wants controlling the ship, manning the ship. Because when you have young players, you don't want to have those imbalances with a personality. And I feel like with this team, it's settling in together. They're really piecing together this roster. And guys seem like they're buying in right now. And everything I heard in that media room was positive, in my opinion. I think there were times that a player could have fed you some BS, could have said the same old, but it felt different. From the players to the fans that were out there, the buzz was different. People are excited, and now it's about rolling into the regular season with that same buzz and excitement. Okay, we still got plenty more to get into on what happened on Saturday at Royals Rally, and more specifically with Brady Singer. I asked him a few questions about last year having the inconsistency in the offseason and if it really mattered in a season that he struggled. We'll get into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. We're also live on TikTok and Instagram at Locked_On_Royals. Got a question about that on Twitter I forgot to get back to. I apologize, but if you're listening to this, the Instagram handle, the TikTok handle, exact same, at Locked_On_Royals. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to the title sponsor today in FanDuel. And as I mentioned to begin the show, won some money over the weekend, so feeling pretty good about that. But happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. Now, I didn't have any football to bet on this past weekend, but I did win some bets with college basketball, which from time to time I feel pretty good on betting about. Just covering the sport, feeling like I've got it down to a science. But that's the fun part about using FanDuel is you can win some money, feel good about it, stash it away in your account. That way you're not burning money, left and right. You're not just losing deals all the time. So with FanDuel, they give you the right picks. They give you the right parlays, and it can be really fun to start winning some money. So they've got, as I said, so many ways for you to end the season with a W or two or sometimes even three. Not only can you bet on who will win the Super Bowl, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers that join today, you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Back to Saturday and what I was able to gather, what I was able to ask, just the overall vibe that I was getting at Kauffman Stadium, mostly positive. I would say that I went in there with the mentality of don't believe everything that you hear. That kind of goes hand in hand with being a journalist or a podcaster, or if you're in broadcasting, you go in to press conferences and you don't say, well, I'm just going to fall for everything they say, because I've done that before. I've done that in my journalistic career going back to college, that sometimes a coach would come in or a player would come in and say all the right things, and lo and behold, it didn't work out in the end. Not that maybe it was a bad hire. Some were, some weren't. But I would say that you don't go in there just wanting to believe everything they tell you. You can, though, get a very good read on players and coaches when they are telling you the truth, when they are being very genuine and they are giving thoughtful answers. And one guy I thought that had really thoughtful answers was Brady Singer. And Brady Singer certainly got a lot of criticism last year. He's gotten criticism in his career for being a little bit stubborn, more so from fans. I mean, I don't think anybody's asked Matt Quatrero or Brian Sweeney or Zach Bove about the stubbornness of Brady Singer. If it continues this year, maybe that question will come out of somebody's mouth, maybe even mine. I don't know. But what I got from Brady Singer in this Saturday Q&A, we'll call it that, because I don't want to call it a press conference, because there were 10 to 15 guys that were brought into that media room. But Brady Singer really seemed honest about last year, the struggles that he had. And I kept going back to why he struggled. I thought it was a talking point consistently throughout last year, and that was the WBC, the World Baseball Classic. Brady goes from this offseason, goes to Surprise barely, and then goes to play in the World Baseball Classic alongside Bobby Witt Jr. And this also brings up a point about Bobby, is Bobby struggled in April and May. He didn't have the typical spring training. He didn't get to slowly work into things, get a lot of reps, get the routine down. He didn't get that. Neither did Brady. But I do feel like on a pitching side, it's different than being a position player. Now, both of them never really played. Brady Singer had one outing, and I think that was in Arizona, if I'm not mistaken, against Team Mexico, got shelled. Joey Meneses had a big 3-run home run, just rocked all over the field. And Bobby Witt Jr. only had maybe a couple of appearances. I think he had a hit in one of the blowouts. But that's kind of the thing here, is that other than those few moments, they weren't playing. So you go from spring training where you're getting game action, even though they don't count, unlike the WBC, you're getting game action. You're getting into routine, playing every day, pitching every third or fourth day, a couple innings, 40, 50 pitches. You build up your arm, or you build up your strength. You get your timing down for Bobby Witt Jr. And there's no surprise to me those two guys struggled. But whereas Bobby Witt Jr. found a way to bounce back after the All-Star break, Brady Singer never really did. He had that stretch right after the All-Star break, but for the most part, didn't build together enough starts to really call it a quality year. It was one of his worst statistical seasons, and I think he acknowledged that very well. What I was fascinated to hear is that he's working on a four-seam fastball, he's working on a sweeper, and now it starts to bring up the question, how many pitches is he going to have? Because really, he had been a two-pitch pitcher for his entire career. He had that sinker or that two-seam with run, kind of a hybrid. And then he had the changeup and the slider, but more so the slider, the changeup he barely utilized. Maybe he's calling that slider the sweeper, and he wants a four-seam to have better command in moments instead of having that run where if it's not working, I can find the zone better. But he was very open about that and working with Brian Sweeney and Zach Bove. But I asked him the question of how hard was it to make that transition of spring ball to WBC back to spring than the regular season. And he said he didn't regret, anything. He really wanted to play for Team USA. He'll never forget that opportunity. But he also said, I'm glad to have a regular spring training. I'm going to enjoy that. I'm excited for it. It's a new season, a fresh season. But I'm going to go out there and say it would not surprise me at all if Brady Singer returns closer to his 2022 form than his 2023 form. I think this is a guy that with the right amount of workload in spring training is going to be ready to go. And where he's at in the rotation, it's a great spot for the Royals. I mean, there's a chance that a couple months into the year, assuming things go well, Brady Singer's one of the best fourth guys in a rotation in the American League. I mean, think about it. He's had to be a number one or number two the last couple of years. It's why I also say with Jordan Lyles, I think we're going to see improvement because it's your fifth starter, not your second or your third. This happens to guys when the pressure's taken off of them. Reagans, Waka, Lugo are the top three, interchangeable for the early part of the season. But that fourth and fifth spot, it's Singer and Lyles. I do think Brady's firmly in that fourth spot, unless the Royals wanted to bump Seth Lugo to the fourth spot. But I think Brady Singer is going to be that number 4. And that I'm very excited about. I want to see in spring if he is going to be using that sweeper, that four-seam a little bit more. Because that can show me the trust that's being built between Brady Singer, Zach Bove, and Brian Sweeney. I think it's very easier said than done for us fans to look at a pitcher who struggles and then a pitching coach and go, well, listen to him. Why don't you just listen to him? Why don't you start throwing different pitches? It's easier said than done, right? Because if you've done some things a certain way your entire career, or you feel really good about the grip, the control of a couple of your pitches, even when they're not working, it's hard to trust it, right? It's hard to trust that, especially coaches that haven't been there that long. So I can understand that element of being a little bit reluctant at time, that when things aren't going well, I'm not going to throw the pitch I don't feel comfortable throwing at all. I'm going to rely on stuff that got me here. But if we can see that transition from a 2-pitch pitcher to a 4-pitch pitcher, I would love to see if that slider and sweeper are different. He could be characterizing his slider as a sweeper. Sounds like, though, he's working on a lot of stuff. and that can be positive. I'm just going to go out there and say it would not surprise me at all in the fourth spot of the rotation now if Brady Singer returns closer to his best year than his worst year last year. I think that this is going to be maybe not a breakout season for him, but a much better year, statistical year for Brady Singer in 2024. Before we move on to our final segment, I want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. When we return, Salvador Perez might have stole the show on Saturday. He looks great, he feels great, and he might be more excited than ever, than anyone on this team for 2024. That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You can also check us out on wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're on Odyssey. We're also on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Well, the last takeaway I really had from Royals Rally involves Salvador Perez, who was one of the last guys we had a chance to interview. And I think, of course, Salvador Perez is going to make an appearance in a big way at Royals Rally. He has been the focal point of this team for a decade plus now. He's great with fans. He's easy to root for. He's probably got the most jersey sales of anybody. That's going to show up on opening day. Now we kind of enter that point of his career, though, where there's younger guys, there's better guys that are going to be stealing the show. Bobby Witt Jr. is one of them. You're hoping Maikel Garcia and Vinny Pasquantino kind of become those front and center guys. You're hoping MJ Melendez can. And Salvy can enter that part of his career where he knows it's nearing its twilight. You know, he's going to be 34 years old in May, I believe. He's a catcher. He's a big catcher. In baseball history, that usually doesn't bode well. You're not going to play till you're 40 or 41. We're probably looking at the last few years of his career at a high level. I mean, think about it. When you went back to 2013, 14, and 15, did you think that Salvador Perez would be starting on an opening day roster over Mike Moustakas, over Eric Hosmer, over Lorenzo Cain? Maybe some of you did. Maybe some of you didn't. But here he is, and he's a catcher. Those positions don't last that long unless you're just in some top physical shape. I will say this, though. Salvy does look great. He looks very spry. He looks, thinner. He looks bulked up a little bit. I know it's kind of weird to say, but, we've seen Salvy in a couple of years look bigger than normal and not just muscle, just a little bit heftier. He looks slimmed down. Looks a little bit bigger in the shoulders and the arms, and that can be great for the power numbers to resurge, of course, because his overall approach isn't going to change that much. He's going to be a guy that swings at everything. It doesn't matter if you lead him off or bat him fourth, bat him eighth, he's swinging. But you want the numbers to correlate, like we said with Singer, closer to 2022, but for Salvy, it's 2021, his 48 home run season, and not like last year where the power numbers dipped, strikeout numbers increased. Just overall, the hitter that he was non-existent. There were stretches that it was really ugly for him. He also was playing through a lot. He brought up the blurriness in his vision. He said he hasn't had any issues with that this offseason. He said dealing with the other nagging injuries that he's had in his career, the knee problems, the thumb problems, the elbow problems, not bothering him one bit. He seemed very enthused, very joyful of what he was experiencing on Saturday. And shocker, Salvador Perez seemed happy. He was smiling. I don't know, though. Last year, even before the season, and you got a chance to see Salvador Perez talk, I think it's just the buzz of it all. It's the buzz of this offseason, the new guys that are there. He brought up catching Michael Wacha, how excited he is to do that. He brought up Maikel Garcia, how he's been keeping track of what he's doing in the Venezuelan Winter League or what he did, the bat flips and everything. He talked about Freddie Fermin, how impressed that he's been with him. All around, it feels like the 2013, 14, 15 Salvador Perez, where there is something to play for. Because players, they're not stupid. Okay, I don't think players are stupid at all. They know going into a year, as much as you can believe in yourself, if a team truly has a chance to compete. I don't think anybody last year could have looked at them and said, 100% absolutely, this team is going to compete from start to finish. I think they were hopeful of it. It could happen. I certainly didn't expect them to lose 106 games. Neither did the players. But this year does feel different because you're getting the vocal part of we want to win the Central, not only from JJ, but from the owner, John Sherman. You are getting that vocal part. And when you hear that as a player, you go, wow, we haven't heard that the last couple of years. They haven't gone out there and said, we expect to compete for the Central. Dayton Moore did a few times and said, we're not a rebuilding team. We're not rebuilding. We expect to compete. Saying you expect to compete and actually bring up the words AL Central title are different to me. And I think that's what's so exciting for Salvador Perez, who hasn't played in much meaningful baseball over the last 5 to 6 years. And I think he knows that his career doesn't have 10 more years in it, 5 more years in it. He's probably looking somewhere at 2 to 3. 2 to 3 would be pretty fortunate, I would say, as well, just because of how Major League Baseball is. There's not many longevity guys anymore. We see guys fall off rather quickly. We see guys get big-time contracts, and then 2 years later, they're let go. It's just the way it goes in Major League Baseball. But the life, the energy that not only saw from Salvador Perez, from everybody that walked in and talked to the media, it was exciting to see. It was very refreshing to see. And J.J. Picollo and John Sherman being very well-rounded in their answers sparked some more excitement for this. And I don't think that this roster is really done at this point. I asked J.J. Picollo if he felt like the roster was finalized. He was going over the Adam Frazier deal, what he expects from that, and how he can play in the lineup, how he can bounce around a little bit. But even he said, we're going to try to be opportunistic over the next 5 to 6 weeks. And if we can take advantage somewhere, we're going to do that. Where I think in past years, we would have heard an opposite answer of, yeah, we feel really good about the guys we have right now. Or, well, we'll see if something comes up. But it seemed like if something does happen in spring training, I'm not going to put it past J.J. Picollo 2 weeks before the regular season, a week before the regular season to make a move. And that contradicts what I said last week. I said if you get to spring training, it doesn't feel like the Royals to go out there and make a move when asked about the closer situation. I was wrong, and which is why I'm glad I asked J.J. Picollo what his thoughts were on that. So we could see more exciting things happen. But my overall takeaway to put a bow on this is that Royals rally had confidence to it. I saw a lot of confidence from players, and that should excite everybody. Now, I still got to go back it up there with victories and wins, and that was addressed multiple times from numerous players, coaches, front office personnel on Saturday of we can all be hopeful, but we got to go out there and win baseball games. They seem ready to go. They seem driven, and I'll be honest, the regular season can't get here soon enough. I will be down in Surprise, Arizona, not this weekend, the next weekend, right before the full squad workout. We'll have plenty of more content like we had on Saturday, more interviews, more podcast episodes. Can't wait to see the team in game action, really, or close to game action, coming up down in Surprise, Arizona here in a few weekends. But as for today, that's going to wrap up another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. One last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever National Sports 24/7 streaming channel. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're back to 5 episodes a week. So on Tuesday, we're going to dive a little bit more into Jordan Lyles and the starting rotation. I think it's time we revisit this. We now feel like he's going to be on this team, barring any unforeseen changes. And I want to get into what it actually means, how long he'll be there, and if it makes sense for the Royals. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.